Is it recording? How do you tell? It is recording because the number's going. All right. Starting mid-song. We're doing great. Welcome to another episode of the Divinely Uninspired Podcast, the podcast from Journey Shepherdsville. And I am here with Penny.
Hey.
Oh.
How's it going?
Oh,
I feel like this is like amateur hour. We just can't pull ourselves together this morning.
Her voice isn't saying it, but her face was very lit up, and that's what surprised me when I looked over at her. And with Jeremy, as always.
Hello.
And I'm Paul, and I just want to apologize for the delay. If you've faithfully been listening to this podcast, we were a little bit behind. There's been a lot going on in our lives, and then last week we recorded one, and then somebody turned the power off, and we lost. And
it was perfect. Like it was probably one of the best ones we've ever done.
Yeah.
And I know you always say that the one that got away was always the best one, but
it was good.
Yeah, we'll keep it between the three of us. It really helped us all out a lot, and I'm sorry that you all weren't here. Maybe one day we'll do a live podcast, and $10 a ticket, something like that. We go up on, the next time you don't want to preach, Jeremy, we could just do a live podcast on a Sunday.
We could do that.
Or a Thursday.
Yeah. It is hard because it did feel like this week is going to be difficult because it's just like last week was so good.
Yeah. But hey, guess what? You all just get the difficult one, not the great one. So Speaking of being difficult, not too great, Penny, how you doing?
What?
Oh, hey. See, that was funny.
I'm great. Everything's great. Everything's fine.
Great.
Yeah.
Well.
Except for your fantasy football team.
Jeremy, don't.
Well, I mean, we can jump right into that. What's going on with your fantasy football team? Word on the street is you're playing in a league with your husband, or he's playing in a league with you.
So last year, Terry was deployed, so he was not in on the church fantasy team, and I stepped in. Well, he came back, and I told the team, hey, I will step back to allow Terry to take my spot. And they were like, oh, no, we've got an open spot for you. And what they don't realize is that like Terry and I we don't play competitive anything together. That is a big no-no because we are both competitive.
I agree. I mean, that's my wife and I also do nothing competitive because I feel like that it used to be a thing where when you were courting someone, you let the lady win, but I was never that person. And I was, this is who I'm going to be. And we would play things when we dated, and there was an incident with someone throwing a putter and yelling, and we never did it again.
He just walked all over me this week. It was so bad. It was a beatdown.
I mean, technically he didn't. It was his team.
I know.
Yeah.
But I also have to sit and listen to it. Like, hey, have you checked it yet? He's like, my kicker, my defense, they've basically beat your entire team. I'm like, could you not right now? Could you just not?
But in fairness, I mean, for people who don't watch football, it's not like his defense is really, I mean, they're good, but they're not like that great. Like It's just they played the Giants, who apparently are like a college amateur team. And
what also like really bugs him is that I act like I don't care. Like I'm like, it's cool. I was like, sometimes it's just bad weeks, and that rubs him the wrong way even more. And he's like, oh, I'm gonna dig it in a little bit more. So all day yesterday and all day.
It's only week one. I don't talk smack to anybody because I'm just like, you never know. Like they can come back and beat you, and it's a long season.
I hope.
Well, I always get excited when I see the projected scores, and I'm going to roll through this season. I had the highest projected score of the week and then lost. And somebody on the other team I played had 0 points on one of his players. I lost because apparently Lamar Jackson got his money and said, I'm all right.
Yeah.
And he got nothing.
Well, at least you didn't get Aaron Rodgers.
Well, at least you don't have Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I don't have him. Yeah, I'm happy about that. But I'm not happy he got hurt. I really don't want to see him hurt, but yeah.
How did Jordan Love look? Not fantasy football, but real football wise.
He looked awesome. The problem is the Bears are terrible, so it's not really a good gauge into. I mean, I'm glad the Bears are terrible because I hate the Bears, but he looked pretty good for his first time getting real action. 3 touchdowns. Yeah.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
So isn't the Jets doing the HBO show?
Yeah. Hard Knocks.
Is that like updated
every week? Yeah.
Yeah. So that should be interesting.
Yeah.
Is he injured, or is he?
They fear that he tore his Achilles, which is a season-ending injury. He did it on the 4th snap. He literally played 1 set of downs. Even if it's an ankle, at his age, it's going to be several weeks of recovery, even if it's just an ankle. He'll come back, but
did he get that guaranteed contract when
he got it?
Oh, man.
I mean, the problem is like I watched the game last night, and some people are probably tuning out because they hate football, but Zach Wilson is honestly awful, and it's not just because Aaron Rodgers is like that good, but like he could not complete a pass. And even the one pass he did complete, Garrett Wilson made like the craziest catch you've ever seen. Like 9 out of 10 wide receivers would not have caught that pass, but he's just that good. But it's just like, I mean, he was throwing balls that I'm like, I could throw that. Like I could,
This should be a test.
Yeah.
Let's see if Jeremy could actually throw that ball.
Oh, he really could. Like,
It's not
I mean,
good for a podcast.
like he only threw one or two balls downfield. The rest of them were just like off, like to the line of scrimmage. But anyway,
It's terrible.
but yeah, fantasy football. I'm 2-0 right now, so I won both of my leagues.
Oh,
So
good for you.
and 1, but it would have been tight if my quarterback would have done anything. But moving on.
But I'm like the Peyton Manning of fantasy football. I always
Yeah.
do really good in the season, and I've never won in the playoffs. So
Well, I think it was our church league the first year, years and years ago, I won.
yeah,
And I had never played fantasy football, and I was like, "This is fun and it's easy." And then never again.
fantasy football is
top
fun,
5.
but a lot of people take it way too serious, and it's
I
like
don't.
you're not actually doing anything, and like 90% of it's luck. I mean, you don't know how these guys are gonna do.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah, I mean
that's my hot take.
It is luck if you pick. I mean, you pick Aaron Rodgers. You think he's gonna. This is his new start.
Yeah, he's got a great team around him.
Oh,
Yeah.
0. There was a good post they put on something this morning that a guy lost. I guess he had like 95.5 points, and he lost to somebody with 95.55 points because he had
Aaron Rodgers.
And he got 0. And it's
Yeah.
the funniest L anyone's ever taken in
Yeah.
fantasy football. So, well, welcome to the podcast, the Fantasy Football Sports Podcast. We'll be back in the spring with regular church talk, or
We've lost so many people right now.
No, yeah, I
That's
think
fine.
people love fantasy, even if they don't know football.
If you've tuned out right now, you're not listening, and we don't want you to listen anyway. That's fine. If you're not listening now, it's fine. So, let's get into the meat of the story. Or do we want to do fair review?
Let's do the fair.
All right. So,
Yeah, so we talked about the fair last week, and it went into like a 25-minute discussion that went off on like sides. I mean, we talked about it. Started off so many things. There's no way we could recreate that conversation.
but it was
anyway.
coming in hot. We were excited
It
about
was.
the fair. It is getting ready to be fall, and we just wrapped up summer with a trip to the fair as a church. And so, anything we want to review that we even remember that happened all that time ago?
The pork chop sandwich was good,
Penny.
and it was hot.
This is a really bad review. Hey, I have a question though.
Okay.
Do like other states make their fairs as big as Kentucky? I feel
Indiana
like we go
does.
overboard.
Yeah, Texas does, Indiana does. I think most states have a
Iowa.
big fair.
The Midwest.
Some places have bigger county fairs than state fairs, but almost everybody does a state fair. Like,
Okay.
yeah.
But like Kentucky, I feel like we get.
Like the Texas one, they have like a whole fairgrounds that's just dedicated to the fair.
Oh, that's
like
nice.
they only use it once a year for the Texas State Fair or whatever, and it's like huge.
Yeah.
I know we don't like to get political. Is it a red state thing that really has fairs? Because you don't think about a California state fair or a
I'm sure
New York
California.
state fair.
I think it's more of a Midwest and South thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's other states. Yeah, you probably think about like the East Coast, like the upper. Like I'm sure New York has a fair, but I don't think it's as big of a deal.
They've got Coney Island anytime they want if they want to see a bunch of weirdos and eat hot dogs.
Well, that's what I think. I think the big part of it, like 90%, and it's probably too, if you think about like these fairs, a lot of it is like for us, we go because it's great people watching and it's food. But like for some of these people that have like animals and stuff in it, like this is their Super Bowl. And so like it's probably more states that have like a big agricultural like background that are probably going to put more emphasis on the fair because that's where they do all the cattle and the things.
So how much do you win if you have the best cow?
I have no idea. I know like the winning like Country Ham wins like $1 million.
That's
They-
crazy.
in Kentucky?
Yeah, they donated all to charity though. It's like a whole like.
Wow,
state.
win it.
So the opening day of the fair, they have a big breakfast with like the governor and like politicians and athletes, and whoever wins the Country Ham, they buy it, and it's usually like $1.2 million or something like that. But it all gets donated to charity. So
Yeah, so maybe God.
Grand Champion
$10
Ham,
million.
$10 million. Okay, I was way
Who
off.
is providing the money for this $10 million?
Well, I think it's like I said. I think it's all. It's not a sham because it goes to. But like, it's not like somebody's really.
it's
It's not like somebody's buying. Somebody's always buying a $10 million ham. They buy it and then they cook it up and they donate it. Like it all goes to proceeds of like charities and stuff. Like this will probably tell you.
There's nothing that makes me feel older than children who, I'm sorry, than people who are in their 20s now who are named Shaquille.
Kelly and Joe Kraft, who are like have more money than the whole rest of the state of Kentucky.
I don't know who Kelly Craft is.
She was running for Daniel Cameron's office or governor or something.
Oh, she was that lady.
They're loaded. Yeah. Her husband Joe Kraft is big in the oil industry. So like they're big UK people. So like it's Joe Kraft
checks out.
arena and stuff like that. But like he donated like last year like 25, like I was at a game and just like, it wasn't even like a big deal. Like it was just like a part, like, you know, they do like the stuff in between like timeouts. Like he came out and like cut a check for like $25 million or something. And it was like, this guy just gave $25 million, but he's so rich. It was just like not even a big deal.
Couldn't even buy his wife an office.
Yeah.
So they take the ham home and serve it for dinner.
No, they serve it at the breakfast. Yeah. They serve it at the country ham breakfast.
Oh,
so they buy it
that?
and then they actually, somebody cooks it on site and then it goes to that.
Was there a lot of pressure if you're cooking a $10 million ham that you really want to get it right?
I don't know. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
I do love some country ham though.
Do you cook it like country ham, or you think they bake it?
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure you could probably cook it. Are you talking about like with Coke and stuff? Because that's not country ham.
No, like
That's,
country ham, you
my slice it real thin. It's like prosciutto.
You like fry it like in a little bit of water.
I'm sure they do that.
No, you can bake them too.
Yeah. Why would you do that though?
I just go with
You
it.
should not
That's why
make
I'm
country
asking.
ham unless it's in a cast iron skillet with some lard.
That's
the only way.
That sounds like a heart attack.
That's the only way. That's how you make country ham.
Yeah.
I would like to thank and apologize to everyone who's still listening to this episode.
No, people take country ham seriously. We did discuss it. I thought this was fascinating. So this did happen. I did not know that they judged hay bales at the state fair. And so I walked into the agricultural room and they have all the stuff and there were hay bales in there. And I engaged in a conversation with the guy and it turned into a 45-minute conversation about hay bales.
I remember last week we talked about, I learned the land between the lakes. That was my big takeaway.
Yeah, why would we talk about land?
Because you were the spokesperson for
Clinton County.
Clinton County, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah.
That's really hard to have a conversation about this.
Yeah, because we already all talked about it. Anyway, I love the whole point is I love the fair more than anybody. I go like 3 times a year.
You love it more than your wife?
No, I said I love it more than anybody, like probably in comparison, but not like compared to my wife.
Gotcha.
Like
That makes sense.
there's probably not a lot of people that love the fair as much as I do.
I do love the fair, but you know, I think it's one of those things. It's once a year. You just get geared up, and then I'm all set. Like, would you go again this week if there was another fair this month?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, I love people watching. I love sorghum. And I can only find sorghum at the fair. Like, it's like the only place that they have sorghum.
You should probably explain what that is.
It is like honey, but it's made from plants. My grandfather was a sorghum farmer, so I love it. It's like molasses. I told you all that.
Well, I don't
No,
remember
you
that.
definitely did not.
I thought I did. Yeah, so my grandfather was a tobacco and had sorghum too.
I think that a shirt that says "People watching in sorghum," and we can wear those next year to the
But
fair.
they give free samples of it.
Yeah.
And like they have the suckers. They have sorghum suckers, and they're 3 for $1 or something like that. And I just buy the whole bowl every year.
So wait, it's a plant, right?
It's plant based. Yeah.
Okay, so what is it used for?
They use it for a lot of things. You can pop it. You can make popcorn out of it.
Okay.
You could also. It's like kind of like corn, and so yeah, you can like take it apart and turn it into like a syrup, and that's where you get sorghum from. But yeah, you can. Are you good about sorghum popcorn?
I
Look
mean,
it up.
I'm just trying to figure out how
Look,
you.
like right there. So it looks
Oh.
kind of like corn. I told you, and like you can pop it. You can put it in a little sorghum popcorn up there. Yep.
Yeah, I didn't know sorghum was this. I always think of it as some kind of syrup, but
It's not popular enough yet, but it's actually considered a superfood because it's super nutrient dense. But
I guess I'll stick to my spinach until the sorghum really takes off.
it has. But people like you is the reason I didn't take it off because
What?
there's not enough market in sorghum.
Well, I think once people hear this podcast, that'll change. This is ground zero for the sorghum takeover. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, man, we are really in the weeds.
No,
this
we're
week.
not.
All right. So
So the fair was awesome. We did have fun. It was just really hot. So that's our review of the fair.
it was 100 degrees every day of the fair, but they said a higher attendance than it's been in years.
Yeah.
Even though the heat, because people are tired of their lives. I don't know, whatever. They're all ready to look at people eat some sorghum.
I will say about one thing about the fair, and I feel like when we were kids, like the fair, like the concerts were like a big deal.
Yes.
And now it's like, who is this person they just brought in?
Well, I think that's in the last 4 or 5 years. It's been a little, because within the last decade, my wife and I saw MC Hammer there for free.
Yeah. Well, they're all free now. Like you don't charge.
Oh, they
for them.
don't have
Yeah.
paid concerts.
There's no
Well, I
paid
think that's the
concerts.
difference.
Yeah.
When we were in high school, we snuck in to see Christina Aguilera and we got kicked out, but she was
Yes.
there performing. And I remember Boys to Men started their resurgence here. Oh, hang on.
Oh,
Okay,
so
Jeremy.
one quick comment. So this wasn't with us. This went with my family. Like, so my kids, we don't take them to Midway because it's crazy and seems very unsafe. And it's really expensive. So they think that the rides at the fair are the giant escalator when you first go in, and then also the tractor ride at the end. So we park, and then we always take a tractor ride back to our car. So we're on the tractor this year, and we're sitting next to this guy. And I didn't know this, so this was new, but it just goes to my State Fair facts. The Oak Ridge Boys have been performing at the State Fair for like 40 straight years.
Yes.
The only year that they canceled was the year of COVID. So we didn't have a fair that year. So this guy from Owensboro, Kentucky, every year, the only time he comes to Louisville, and he made that very clear, the only time he comes to the city is for the State Fair on the night the Oak Ridge Boys. I mean, this guy was like talking to us about the Oak Ridge Boys for like 25 minutes. So then we were like, oh, so that really stinks the year of COVID. He goes, well, it's all right. He goes, I wrote the Oak Ridge Boys, and they sent me a ticket that they were going to use, and they signed it. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. He's like, would you like to see it? He has it in his wallet.
Oh.
And I was like, this is like this guy, like this is like the biggest deal in the world to him. And it was really awesome. Like he was so excited. But anyway, that happened on the thing.
Oh, well, good for him.
Yeah.
I mean,
Brings him joy.
Jeremy, you have a lot of trivial knowledge. Is it still the original Oak Ridge Boys, or is that like more of a concept than the people?
I think the guy with the big long white beard still in it. I don't know about.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
Yeah, they've moved to this
Oh
is
wait,
funny.
Penny's got Oak
All I
Ridge
know
Boys
about the
update.
Oak Ridge Boys is that giddy up, mbop, Elvira. Yeah, that's
So I had a family member that would do the same thing, come every year just for the Oak Ridge Boys, like go to the fair just to watch them. And I think that they've lost a member, and then it was down to 3 at one point. And then they did add another one. So there are some, like the guy, okay, there's the beard.
there's
American
the
Made is
beard
good
gap.
song. Bobby Sue. These
That's
are
what I'm
good
no. I
saying.
mean, I know the other songs, but Elvira was the one.
Y'all
that-
Come Back Saloon. Come on, these are.
Thank God for Kids. Oh, have you ever heard Thank God for Kids?
No, it's a Christmas album.
That
It's
is no. It's like the Oak Ridge Boys versions. It's good. It's a good song.
My wife would have a fit. This music comes on. She's.
Look at that
It's
mustache.
just not her.
It is, yeah, that's.
Well, that's for 40 years ago. These people. This is what their first summer at the fair was. This picture.
Anyway, but they become 40.
But yes, it was. They used to have great concerts, and they don't anymore. I don't know what the deal is. I remember. I was going to say Boys to Men came for free one year, and the traffic on the Waterson to get in was backed up for miles and miles and miles. And then all of a sudden, Boys to Men were performing at the White House, and they were everywhere again because people said, "Oh, we still like Boys to Men." I don't know what happened to them, but they were back, and I thank the Kentucky State Fair for that. So,
all right.
no transition, but
Yeah.
we're going right into the juice of it. So we had a little bit of trouble because, again, not to keep bringing it up, we were just killing it last week, and we really. It's been a slow news week if you're trying to find something entertaining to talk about. So we came up with some topics and we burned them through them. So we're gonna go to something we call it like the bench. We're going to the B team of topics this week, and the first one is an article in Relevant Magazine, which is. Relevant Magazine is a Christian magazine. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is it still printed or is it online only?
I think you can still get print edition, but they only do it twice a year, and they make it look like a big book, like a coffee table book, and it looks really nice. But yeah, I mean, print magazines are dead, so I think they kind of went away from it.
Well, I remember in high school and like if you went somewhere and they had Relevant Magazine, those people were the good Christians. They had that on the coffee table.
Yeah, so they do like a big book every year. Like they take all the really good articles and they make it like look real nice, and you can put it on your coffee table or something.
Well, hopefully this will be the new cover, the photo from this article, which is Satanic Panic Happens at Hobby Lobby Over Fake Photos. And apparently someone who was not trying to disguise themselves made an AI that is artificial intelligence images of just the best stuff at Hobby Lobby. Satan, other it looks like evil bric-a-brac in the background, and posted the photos online under the account that says AI Art Universe. And boy, oh boy, are the people with no critical thinking and common sense. They are up in arms over what is happening at their blessed Hobby Lobby.
They're boycotting it.
People. The quote from this person whose name has been blocked out, but her and her husband's face have not been. Well, I guess even, quote, Christian-owned, unquote, companies can be bought for the right price. Severely disappointed. But if you could see, which you should, look this article up, these ridiculous things that they have at the Hobby Lobby.
It's like satanic stuff.
It is an 8-foot head with, like, goat ears.
But
or
it looks
horns.
just like, I mean, I don't understand, like, it just looks like a Halloween decoration. Like, I wouldn't put that up in my house, like, but, like, I could see somebody, like, buying that and put it on their front porch for Halloween or
If
something.
this was at Spirit Halloween, I could see that.
Yeah.
I think it's the Hobby Lobby issue that.
Hot take. I hate Hobby Lobby. I don't get it. It just it feels like a Kmart. Rest in peace, Kmart's. But it just feels dirty. It feels like weird. I never know how much anything costs because everything's like
50% off.
Everything's 50% off or 30% off. Like, so why don't you just make that the price?
Right.
Like, just tell me that's the price, and don't like. There's just signs everywhere. I don't like it. Every time my wife makes me go in there, I get real upset.
Jeremy would also add, "Stay off his lawn," because these are the old man complaints. How much does this cost?
Because you don't. I mean, because I'm just gonna buy it, so I don't even care about the price. I don't look at it. But like, if it's something I need, like I'm not like, I'm just picking up everything. But it feels like Kmart and like TJ Maxx had a baby, and just here's Hobby Lobby.
What do you think about that, Penny? What do you think about Hobby Lobby?
It's okay. Like, I don't seek Hobby Lobby. I like to go out and be like, let's go to Hobby Lobby. My kid likes it. Taylor loves it. Like, I'm with Jeremy on that. Like, they just need to put everything down to a decent price instead of being like, I saved 50% or I saved 30%. Like, just mark it down to what it needs to be. I will say that Hobby Lobby is pretty great during the seasons, like Christmas. If I need to go get something, I can pick it up like there for like the tree. We did buy a tree from there a couple of years ago, and the lights are already out on it. So, Hobby
what
Lobby,
I think what they should do with holidays is you get like a stipend, and when you're like 25 years old, you get like, a couple $1,000, and you just buy those decorations, and those have to last the rest of your life. Like, I think that would just be, I don't think you need new decorations. I think you just put up the same stuff every year and just say.
Some people do.
That's what I'm thinking. I love, like, my mom's been using the same decorations since I was a child. Like, it's just like, this is awesome. Like, because it's nostalgia too. It's like, you walk in and you're looking for that, or you're looking.
Yeah. So my mom does the same thing, and she has kept, like, I don't know if your mom has, but my mom has taken like good care of like every decoration from, I don't know, the 80s forward. And those Santa Claus figurines that are
the blown mold ones,
they're so expensive. They are so expensive now. I've tried to find one.
Yeah.
Like,
because people use them ironically now.
They're so
like
valuable.
Nostalgic. Yeah.
Like, I'll try to find them everywhere. Like, just to find them for maybe around $50. You can't find one under $100.
Yeah, they had some at the Peddler's Mall up here.
Oh, for how much?
We didn't check because it's always ridiculously expensive.
You can find them, but you're not going to like this answer. You just need to find when people die and they have estate sales, and you'll be able to find them.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
I mean, like,
and they're haunted.
But no, they're not haunted. But I just think it should just be. I don't know. I'm not a Grinch or like a. I think people go too crazy. I think you should just get one shot, and that's just the rest of your life. This is Christmas.
So when you come to Grinchmas 2043 and you wonder why the same decorations are up, it's because we blew our stipend.
But no, I mean, think about Grinchmas. Like, people like that. Like, when we do they like the nostalgia of Snoopy and the Grinch and all that stuff. So, yeah.
Well,
but anyway, I think this is awesome that people got upset.
I would agree that a lot of the feeling of Christmas is the Christmas when you were a child and it was free. And you're like, these were nice times when it wasn't.
Oh, and you thought it was all
Christmas
like, when Christmas was
when you knew
magical.
it was magical, and before it was like, well, this is going to be expensive year this year.
Yeah,
I feel like we can't really have this conversation without April. Like, I feel like she would really like Hobby Lobby.
Well, if I have to have a conversation with April, I'd rather just not have it.
I think there
is.
in
April?
Like, I think that this article though just points to the ridiculousness of people. Like, the fact that legitimately it says AI Art Universe is who put this stuff up.
Right.
And you're not, Al. It's Al Art. That's right. See, there it goes back to, we did talk about that last week. AI always looks like Al to me. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't, because it's just, they need to figure that out. But, yeah, I think it's, but these, like, even these things, I know they're like satanic, so to speak. They're not that terrible. I mean, like, it's not like you go to Spirit Halloween though. I mean, there's like babies that are like, there's like weird stuff there, like, that I could see people get upset about. But
what is happening?
There's like zombie babies and stuff.
So I think my takeaway really from this is that, all right, so in this country, a lot of people consider themselves Christian, and I don't even know if they know what that means. And I think this woman, bless her heart, or maybe her husband, but I doubt it, whoever's profile this is being used to talk about, they're at home and they're sitting and they're thinking, you know what? I'm protecting what I consider Christianity, which is Hobby Lobby, I'm going to be upset about that because Satan is in my store. And I think that rose on to our next topic.
Well, I think she doesn't need to guess what it means to be Christian. I think she needs to go to Hobby Lobby and the signs will tell her what it means.
Well,
there's verses on everything.
Well, that's fair too. All right. Well, I think when they think about Christianity, it used to be, following Jesus, doing, the work of God, being the hands and feet here on earth, loving your neighbor, all that boring stuff. But it turns out that in an article from Newsweek today, quoting, though, an article from Christianity Today, that evangelicals are now rejecting Jesus' teaching, thinking that they are too liberal. So, what do you got to think about that, Jeremy?
It doesn't surprise me. I think that people don't read their Bibles and don't actually know very much about Jesus. So that'd be my first take. Yeah, I think that if you think about Jesus, and a lot of his teachings, like this is not what he was. So here's the problem. All right, so let me break it this way. The problem is not Jesus is too liberal or Jesus is a socialist, which is the two I hear. He taught ideas that now fit into a liberal projection or a socialist projection. Does that make sense? Like yes. That he wasn't taking those sides, and that's the part that people don't understand is he was teaching people how to be a new type of human and what they should be and how God created us to be. And so now the fact that Jesus wants to give to the poor and all that, well, it's not like Jesus did that so that he would fit within the liberal or socialist parties. He was saying that, and then now those are the things that we identify with those groups of people. So I think it's just, I don't know, it goes back to my thing, people don't read their Bibles. But I'm not surprised by any of this. Like this right here, when it says the pastor would say, I'm literally quoting Jesus, the response would be, yes, but that doesn't work anymore. That's weak. It sounds like a child said, but that's weak. So no, I'm not surprised. And even like I've actually had a conversation one time with a pastor locally about some stuff that was going on in our community, and we were having a discussion. A group of pastors were meeting together, and it got brought up something, and I just kind of referenced the verse where it talks about in Romans like that we should honor the government and like respect the king and all that stuff. And he said, I don't care. That's what that says. He says, it goes, what did he say exactly? He said, I don't care that that's what that says. We put our trust in the Bible. And I was like, ironic statement of the year. I just shared a verse that's in the Bible with you, but like it didn't fit in your agenda. So it was like, you want to claim like, our truth is the Bible. Well, I just read you a literal text in the Bible, but it doesn't fit with what you think. So you're just like, no, we're not doing that. That was from a pastor. So
yeah, well, I mean,
that makes you feel real confident.
Probably the same pastor teaching about the rapture on Sunday.
I don't know. They probably all do that.
Yeah. So when it says, so sorry, we're just kind of like reading this article, but the turn the other cheek and to have someone come up after to say, where did you get those liberal talking points? How is that a liberal talking point?
That you're not aggressively violent. I think that is like the thing where if someone hits you, you hit them back twice as hard. Seems to be one group of people's kind of thing. Like you're not humble. You're not, you stand proud for what you believe in, and that means violence if necessary. But
that's crazy.
Well, you know what, to people, to us, to weak liberals like myself, that is very, very crazy. You're right.
Yeah. And I think again, it's just people don't read their Bible. So like, yeah, we're told to turn the other cheek, but like we're also, I mean, Jesus at one point tells the disciples to go get swords, to defend themselves. Like it's all within reason. You know what I'm saying? Like it's when you lift something out of its context and just like, this is the statement. Like, so I don't know that again, you know what I'm saying? Like it just is.
I think my big takeaway, well, not even takeaway, the way I live my life and the way I think about it is I have my beliefs and separate from my faith, and then I have like faith-based beliefs. But whatever you want to believe, whatever you want to say and do,
yeah, as long as you're not hurting anybody,
yeah,
you're probably making a mistake, or you could be making a mistake if you think something different than me. But I'm, live and let live. But don't get those things mixed up. Like, don't defend your decision by saying it is a religious decision or it's a Bible-based decision when it's not. In fact, what you're taking is your point of view and what you have seen in life and what you've chosen to believe, and then try to cram a couple of verses in there that make you feel like it's a higher cause that you believe that way and not the other way around where you take some of your life and wrap a Bible around it.
And I think that's the bigger part. It goes back to, again, my statement. I don't think people read their Bibles. I said people read their Bibles. I don't think people think critically in the way of trying to understand what the Bible is trying to say. Like, they just read it at face value and they say, oh, okay. But then the other part of it is, we want to just, and going back to our Hobby Lobby, and I know people have these, I have a couple in my house, but like we take these signs or like these coffee mugs like we've talked about before, and you just take a verse and you just like pick it up out of it and put it on here and you say, this is my life verse, or this is my, like 90% of the time, like you have no idea the context of what was going on when that statement was made. And so it doesn't surprise me that people think like this though, that like, Jesus was quite a controversial figure. He didn't get put on a cross because he was like, everybody's best friend. Like, he said things that were very controversial in their context and culture and was against the system and powers that be at the time. And it upset people. And that's why they put him on a cross. And, so. Yeah.
Well, and to go further to that, I think that, we can even ask you as the pastor of our church, and then we have the children's minister over here. When do you really start giving kids that kind of like critical thinking of the Bible? Because I was raised in a very Christian household, went to a Christian elementary school, and it wasn't until I was in my mid-20s where you actually started hearing things about context. And like I grew up in church, and you would just hear the Bible verse and you'd hear the stories and you go, oh, that's nice. But then one day someone's like, well, actually what was going on in the time of this was this, and this is what they're saying. Oh, well, it had never occurred to me that this wasn't just, blanket statements for all of time, that there was actually, you start thinking about the Bible as letters to communities written by people and not just even going as far as how the Bible was put together, that it wasn't just a couple of guys sat down in a room and wrote it like the Declaration of Independence. It was like, oh, this is something that we wrote to be read as the Bible, when it was really just a collection of letters that have been chosen to put in here, like that kind of thing. So
I think that it's a complicated answer. I'm trying to process how to answer it. I think it starts with this. I think it starts with this. I think that you can do it earlier than you used to. Mm-hmm. And part of that is this. I think that part of the problem with the way a lot of us thought about the Bible, we didn't understand that the Bible was written for everybody, okay? And also, not only was it written for everybody, it was written a long time ago. So that's like, to explain that to a kid can be difficult. Like, Elliot's around, oh, it's my son. Elliot's 9 years old. No, he's 10. He's an age. He's not a teenager yet.
Listen, his birthday wasn't on the calendar this year. It's not your fault that you missed it.
So, but all that to say, like, when we were kids, let's be honest, I didn't understand that there was a world outside of like where I grew up at, because like we didn't have access to the internet. There wasn't, it just wasn't that type of thing. So like we lived in a very small world, and so I think part of that is kids now are exposed earlier and earlier through a lot of different formats to understand how big the world actually is, and that we're not the only people and all that. So all that to say that, like, I think now you can earlier and earlier explain to kids like more of the context of that, because they're familiar with the fact that there is a big world around them. Now, does it make sense a little bit? I think for us growing up, it was harder for us to process that.
Yeah, we knew that they were there.
It sounded like a land. It's like Star Wars, like in a land like far away.
Absolutely.
Well, now all of a sudden, kids understand that earlier and earlier because of a lot of different reasons. So I think you can start introducing those ideas earlier. I think, and me and Penny have talked about this before, like just with philosophy of kids ministry. I think we grew up, and correct me if I'm wrong, I grew up, most of the stories I knew were from the Old Testament.
Right.
And then there's Jesus. Yeah. But that's actually a mistake, because the Old Testament, even like this week with my sermon, if anybody listens to it, like when we talk about like covenant, like, if you missed it, like the whole like thing is about covenant. Covenant is such a foreign idea to us, but like for them, it would have made total sense, like in that first, in that world. And so all that to say, like, that, getting to that place of being able to help them understand that, a 9 and 10-year-old probably not going to be able to understand covenant. Most adults were still asking me questions after the service, like, well, what is this? But if you start with Jesus and his stories, does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And then you go back to that as they get older and like talk about there's actually a foundation for Jesus versus getting shoved down some of these stories that, you know, you start reading some of these stories and you're like, oh, this isn't as simple as David just stood before a giant and hit him with a slingshot. Like there's a whole lot of stuff behind that story that even get to that moment that a kid's not ready to understand yet, you know, with Saul and the way that Saul lived and the fact that, I mean, there's so much to that story that it's just, I don't know.
But we leave it usually at that, like, oh, he trusted in God and he hit him in the head with a rock. Or
like Noah. I mean, Noah and the flood is it's still depressing to think about it. Like, you know, like one of my favorite lessons was when this is why I don't teach kids. But we were talking one time and Noah came up and we were talking about it and they presented it like this happy story. And I was like, no, I'm not doing this. And I was like, you know, yeah, there were 2 bunnies that made it on the ark, but what about the thousands of them that drowned that day? You know, like, you know, and kids were like crying and stuff, but they just need to tough it up. But
not to show ignorance, doesn't Noah's end. It's also very
there's a lot of weird stuff at the end.
It doesn't end when it hits the mountain and they replenish the earth.
But all that to say, like, there's a lot of complicated stuff. But like and I'm not saying it's a bad story, and we should, but like, you know, you give kids like an ark toy, you know, and like we take them to the ark. Yeah. Like, and I understand the context. It is a tragic story because in human history, and I talked about this on Sunday, there's a cyclical cycle of violence and all that. And, you know, God is grieved in his heart and all that stuff. But I mean, it's a sad story. And I don't know if kids are ready for that stuff yet. So I think you start with the stories of Jesus. You know, my wife is way smarter than me sometimes. So one of the things we're doing with our kids right now is most of the time, we're actually just, because they have a lot of questions, they're getting that age. And so we're just starting with the fruits of the Spirit. And so we just take a fruit of the Spirit and we talk about it and we talk about the importance of it and why it applies to our lives. And then we just focus on that for a period of time. And then when we feel like they've got a good concept of that fruit of the Spirit, we move on to the next fruit of the Spirit. And we're just walking through that stuff. And it seems to be resonating a lot more than if I'm like, you know. And then there were 3 guys and they were in a furnace and there was a 4th guy. Like, I mean, it's true.
Right.
But it's difficult for a kid to like, not only because it's a foreign world and time, but also like just that's hard to process.
Well, I think a lot of people don't like to process and they don't like to think about it. They'd rather just shoot off a tweet or a Facebook thing about how they're disappointed in whatever they don't understand. And then, but they did that for Jesus. They didn't do it, you know.
But all I'd say, I went a long way. But I think you can do it earlier and earlier now if you want to introduce that stuff because they understand we're not the only ones. They understand, I think, a greater concept of time than maybe I didn't. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, I kind of, when I watched the Truman Show, I was like, you know, I kind of felt like that as a kid, like that I'm the movie star in the world that revolves around me. Well, kids now understand that earlier and earlier that that's not reality, although they think they are because of TikTok and Instagram. But
well, I think, and Paul, what he was trying to say also was that we have our generation that grew up, for those of us who didn't go to seminary, you know, we didn't study the Bible in college. Like, we're in our 20s trying to figure it out. Like, we're all trying to figure it out. Like, and we'll get pieces of things. It takes a good pastor to teach those things to adults who were oblivious to it as a child. So that too, like the Bible class, the What Is class is great here at Journey to do that. It opened my eyes to a lot of things. And also, like, Jeremy will also, like, his preaching, I feel, helps for a better understanding as an adult, like to stories in the Old Testament as opposed to the ones we learned as kids. So
well, yeah. Go ahead, Paul.
Well, yes, this is more blowing smoke for Jeremy.
Nah, that's what I stole it from other people, so it's all good.
Well, I mean, hopefully you didn't write the Bible, so you're not taking credit for any of that stuff. But like, my wife really enjoys it because you put historical context into things, and you make churches I've grown up and been in the past, you would take maybe a Bible verse and then someone would talk for 45 minutes on it. But it's like, you've not told me anything except you have gotten like the vibe of like this one verse. And then you just start adding your own thoughts to it, as opposed to what this verse means, how you could use it in your life, what the context of it is, what was going, like people would say, like the Philippians verse, like, I can do anything, or God gives me strength. The worst quoted scripture of all time. What is I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Yeah.
Yeah.
They would do something like that. And then, you start talking about David, and then you start talking about the Olympics, and then you start talking about the army, and you're like, what are we talking? This is not, to me, that is the kind of church that I grew up in. And then you're like, oh, Jesus is great. And then you get older and you're like, I can see when people start deconstructing and they start leaving the church, it's because they realize that so much of what they were taught were just opinions of people that they no longer agree with the opinions but they don't know anything about Christ. They only know about what some older person in their church believed. So
I think I think I stole it. I mean, not the sermon, but like the idea, I think of the Andy Stanley, but I think Tim Keller talks about this a lot. Like, I always assume you have no idea what I'm talking about. And I'm not saying it because I think you're dumb or anything like that, but I'm just assuming, or I don't want to assume when I talk about Moses that everybody knows what Moses is about unless they've seen Prince of Egypt or Ten Commandments. Like, and it's a very, the people that have seen Prince of Egypt, the best soundtrack ever, apparently.
Second best.
And so I want to assume they don't know all of the context. So I want to give them the context to help make the story, a little bit easier to understand. The other thing is I don't want to, talk about, I have a master's of divinity. Like it's not like, it's not like I just picked, but here's the thing. I don't want to talk over people's heads,
right? Because
then it's like, oh, look how smart he is. Yeah. But then you don't know anything. So like even this week with the Abraham sermon, like after Thursday, I pulled a couple people aside and I said, this is gonna sound really bad when I say this, but was that over your head? Like, because if the whole covenant thing, because it's so foreign to us, like I don't want to just talk about it and then it be like lost. And so they were like, no, we understood it. There were a couple questions. So then like on Sunday, I changed it up because I started with covenant versus doing it at the end, because I want to start with, this is going to be a concept that's going to be hard to understand. So let me try to explain it to you at the beginning, because then the rest of the story will make more sense, And so anyway, but like I want it to be at a place where you walk away and you actually understood what I just said. Like to talk over people doesn't do any good.
No, there's a certain truth to, there's like a business concept of you're trying to play to the dumbest person in the room. Like you don't want to make it too boring for people who know what's going on, but you're not reaching everybody if there's, 10% of the room that's just scratching their head and they're just like, well, we're moving on. But this is an important concept that you really have to get across to them. So, listen, I think this has turned into, it's no last week's podcast.
Yeah, it's no last week.
But
last week was funny.
It's good.
Pretty serious today.
Well, and I think now comes the time in our podcast where Jeremy gets to put his Masters of Divinity to the test.
Sounds so holy.
And
like Masters of the Universe.
I think he's now the Divinity Master is what we're going to start calling
Not at all.
Jeremy. So I don't remember the exact word. Penny, do you remember the exact wording of what?
Yeah. So I want to first say that I am the only person that will ever submit a question. Do other people submit questions?
Well,
or is it
I
just
stopped.
me?
Okay, so let's just tear down that fourth wall just a little bit. I have never once asked for questions, as I did not put my email out here. And the email that we used to have, we do not have access to that. We don't know what the password is.
They can email me. Everybody has my email.
Or paul@journeyshepherdsville.com if you have a question to ask Jeremy that you don't want to. We won't read your name or address or anything on the podcast unless you just really want it out there. But Penny.
I have the question. You ready?
Penny, well, hang on.
What? There it is. There it is.
Yeah, Penny's got her intro for the question for.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Do we actually bear the image of God, or are we to be the image of God, or somehow a little bit of both?
Yes.
Okay. To which one?
Both. So it's gonna be hard because like my whole beginning, I launched into last week after last week's conversation,
and that's when we lost.
It led right into it, and so now it's gonna be like, all right. So here's what you need to know.
Yeah.
So in the ancient world, we talked about this a little bit. Is that gods had to have images? Like that was the way they wanted to see something, and so early on, because again, and this is biblical context. We believe the Bible is the beginning story, but the story we're introduced to, there's other cultures and civilizations already in existence. So by the time we get to like Abraham and the covenant, like they're not the only people in the world. There's lots of other people, lots of other cultures, lots of other gods, lots of all that stuff. So for them, it was really important that they have images of their gods. So when the biblical narrative, the way we think about it, going from Abraham into eventually we get to Moses, their understanding was that God is so complicated, he can't be depicted in an image, right? And so it was almost like a counter narrative of we're not going to put God's image on, like we don't know what he looks like, because he's so big, to put one image on it would be actually a bad thing. So, and there's even like weird stuff, like I don't know if you know this, like in Hebrew, just in our Bible, but in the ancient world, you couldn't write the name of God somewhere that could be destroyed. And so it was very rarely used. They usually had to carve it into things, but like you couldn't write it down on something because they had such respect for it and all that. Okay. So all that's the setup for the way they thought. Okay. So then you get to the Genesis story, and whoever wrote it, Moses or whoever wrote that, when it talks about like the creation story, part of the reason that they focused on not creating images of God was that God had already created an image of himself, and that was humanity, right? And so we are supposed to be a depiction of what God is like. And so the reason that we don't need images of God is because God's already created images of himself in us and human beings. And so that's like kind of one of the things. And so we're put in charge, and the way that God uses imagery to describe how we're supposed to depict him is he uses a garden. Like we cultivate things, we create things, we grow things. And so when it talks about the image of God, that we're creating the image of God, it's not that we look like God like a mirror, you know what I'm saying? But we actually reflect who he is through the way we live, through the way we act and do all that stuff. And so, so when it talks about we're created in the image of God, it's because we were created to reflect him. We were created to be like him. Now, the specifics of that is we were created to be in relationship, which that's the Trinitarian view, which is complicated. We were created to love and to be loved. So those are both things that God is created in. We were created to create, and I think that God is a God of creation. And so we were created to create ourselves. And so we've created a world, we create systems and cultures and all that stuff. And then God is a God that cultivates things, and which is kind of like creating, but in a different, like sustaining things. And so we do that too. So in those attributes, we also reflect who he is, not just in the way we approach the world, but also we have those qualities that he has, that we were meant to be in relationship, to love and to be loved, and then creating and cultivating.
That's a lot.
Does that make sense though?
Okay. So if you mean like not a mirror image, he can be, but also God doesn't look human. Like he's not.
No. So N.T. Wright, so N.T. Wright talks about that, like he thinks that he uses in his talk, he used I think it was an angled mirror. And so rather than a direct thing, which just means like we look at each other, like N.T. Wright talks about that it's like an angled mirror. And so it's like if you were sick, like if the TV is a mirror, like I can look at it and see you. Does that make sense? So it's like an angle. And versus, it's actually, we're not going to watch it, but it's actually that clip you just passed up right there. Anyway, so he talks about like, so we reflect God. So yeah, it's not like an image in the sense we look like God. Now, all that to say, when we get to Jesus, my chair just popped out. When we get to Jesus, what happens is, because I think, so here's the other thing. Okay, so this is going to hopefully make sense, and I know I'm talking a lot. When we get to Jesus, Jesus looks like us so that we can understand God better, because my opinion has gotten so convoluted by that point, we need an image of what God is like, of what humanity should be like. And then the other thing is like the Trinitarian view. Like when we talk about God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit, I think, my personal opinion, and there's lots of people who agree with this, I think the reason that those language pieces are used is so we can understand, because we understand what a father looks like, we understand what a son looks like, and we understand what a spirit is. Like it's something you don't see that hovers or haunts or whatever word you want to use. So like, I think that's why that imagery is used. It's not like I really think that Jesus is like God's son, like Elliot's my son. Does that make sense? Like, I think that's just helpful language so we can understand those images, because to try to understand the Trinitarian view just using what it actually is, I don't know if we could adequately describe it in a way that would make sense.
Okay.
So does that make sense?
Yeah, like the way that if like Jesus told us how to pray, like to our Father in heaven, like we refer to him as our Father, which has kind of put him in that place of going, okay, he looks like us, right?
Because you understand what a father is.
Right.
Do you understand what God of the universe is?
No.
Right. That's what I'm saying. So I think it's helpful, and it goes back to the original thing. We can't depict God with one image. So like, even though Jesus calls God the Father the most frequently, there's other language that he uses to describe who God is. So that's why you don't create one image, because if you create one image, you're almost doing a disservice, because God isn't just one image. And that's the point of Jesus too. Jesus is an image of God, but also an image of us, and so Jesus actually comes to show us not just who God is, but what we could actually be. And so I think that's the twofold part of it. He's fully God, fully human. So Jesus, in his teachings that apparently are too liberal for some people, he's actually trying to show us what humanity's capable of.
This is an interesting topic. So people, I guess my question in the end would have been, so people who do see God as that way, as is if we were to be an image of him, an actual physical image of him, it's okay to think that, in some sort of context, right?
Now what? Say that again.
So, I mean, if we're saying, you're not saying he's a direct mirror image of us, he's not some human being we
don't look like him.
Yeah. But some people do think that. A lot of Christians think that, right?
Yeah, but I think that's...
And that's okay. One of the questions is it okay to think that?
It's not bad to think that. I don't know if it's helpful, because I think that... So what it comes down to, what it really boils down to, is the larger context. So I make God look like me, so then God's like me. He's just better than me.
Right.
But we're not even talking about the same thing. Most of our imagery of God is not actually from God, it's from Zeus. Because the Greeks depicted what Zeus looks like. So you think of a white old man with a beard.
Right, sitting on a throne. Right, yeah.
You just described Zeus.
Yeah.
Because there's statues of Zeus that look like that. You see what I'm saying? So that's the worldview we've had, and that's what. So, but what the Bible's trying to cast in is an image of God, that God doesn't look anything like us, and it's even all that to say we don't know, because nobody's ever seen God other than Jesus. Even the burning bush, he passes by it, but there's not even a direct image of it or whatever. And so I don't think it's wrong or bad that people think that he looks like us in a physical image. But what I think is you're on a dangerous path of trying to make God look more like you, not just in the image, but in the way that you are.
Right. You've placed him in a box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Versus being able to say he's I don't fully understand actually what God is. And that's me being on. I don't fully understand what God is.
Oh, okay.
I have a picture of it. And I think the Bible is limiting even, Deuteronomy 29:29, where Moses says that there are secret things of the Lord. There's just things about him we're not going to know. And I don't know if we ever know. The other thing is, it's that idea of we want him to look like us because it is easier to comprehend, but you're a finite thing trying to understand an infinite thing, right? That's really, really difficult. We're not bound by space and time. Or he's not, we are. Sorry. He's not bound by space and time. We are bound by space and time. So start wrapping your brain around that. To God, there is actually no thing as time. It's a created thing.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
So
I just feel people, this conversation came up in another podcast, and I thought this is, I want to hear what Jeremy has to say about it. Just because this idea of what people think of what the end's going to be like, what heaven's going to be like, which is going to be God, and then you have Jesus, and then and you're right, it's just a depiction of what us as humans think it's supposed to look like, because that comes from Zeus and from the other God. That's interesting.
And when John in Revelation, when he's painting a picture of what we think heaven looks like, streets of gold and pearly gates, all he's doing is thinking of the nicest things that they could think of in their culture.
Right.
He's not actually saying this is what it looks like. He's just saying whatever the nicest thing is in your culture, think of that, and that's it. So I don't know what the nicest thing in our culture is, but that's what it would look like.
So no pearly gates.
There's gonna be lots of pickleball courts, I'll tell you that much, because that seems to be the hot thing now. Lots of pickleball.
Oh, that's good. And a lot of the Prince of Egypt soundtrack playing.
No. Okay. No. Well, we're...
Little pearl jam.
Jeremy has spoken, and that is what the image of God is like. I have a question then to follow up to that, and it might be a childish question, but because there is no actual image of God like that, what do you all think about in your brain when you pray?
Oh,
what do you see in your head when you pray?
So I've been comfortable, so for me, and this is going to sound, people are going to think I'm a hippie and a liberal. When I do the majority of my praying outside. So I very like when I run or go to Bernheim, like that's like my praying zone, I should say. So I think of nature. I think of those type of things. Like I'm not like, I don't think of like Mother Earth. Like I think of, but like that's what I picture is I don't picture a face or a person. Like I picture just like the beauty of what's around me.
That's so funny. I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like my favorite part of the day is dusk when like the sky is pink and orange and the landscape is black and it's just, I don't know. It makes me think of him. So
yeah, I think and then just from what you were saying, I think a lot of people when they pray, they're like bearded old man, like, hey, talking to you.
Yeah.
And you're listening or.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, that imagery is not helpful to me.
Yeah. I mean, but how you just described all that is more than, I can't speak for Penny, but, myself growing up, more than we'd ever heard or any kind of like thought about, what God actually is.
That's actually true. I never like grew up. I mean, imagery as God growing up would have been the man on the throne, like with a white beard.
Well, and part of that is, here's the thing, and this is going to sound really weird, but just go with it. Part of it is you probably grew up with an older pastor, probably white hair. You start to think of him as God. Like, and what I mean by that is he's an image of God. Like this is like, does it make sense a little bit? Like, because I'm communicating on God's behalf, the messengers of God. Yeah. Like, there's subliminal, like, and like I said, I don't think that people think that their pastors are God. Like, that's what I'm saying. But like, you create images by association, right? And so, if the guy presenting to you who God is looks like that, then maybe God starts to be this old man or this, whatever. So there's a lot of imagery that just gets painted. So that's why I just take out the whole image thing and just think about.
Well, that's good, Penny. Got any follow-up for that, or
that's it? Thanks.
You have been satiated with the knowledge of our divine master, Jeremy.
I need everyone to start coming up with questions because I'm constantly asking questions.
That's good.
I mean, you can send them to me if you want, and then I will ask them and say they're from me. I will do that too, just as long as somebody else starts doing it.
All right. Well, if that's it, I think we have just a couple of things. If you are a local listener of us, then we've got Fall Fest coming up September 30th. That's just a couple weeks away. We've got lots of fun. It's in the morning this year. It's not late in the evening. Vendors, food trucks, fun for the kids. You can come out and meet the podcast crew, except for Jeremy. He's going to be in Florida. It's not his fault.
Yeah,
that's what I've heard.
It's fall break. I'm sorry.
So
come meet our pastor, and he's not here.
He'll FaceTime. We'll put a big screen up, and he'll give us some tales. So, all right. Well, thanks for listening to that. Hopefully, if you've made it to the end, God bless you. You are an amazing person, and you might need another hobby. But we love you all, and we'll be back with a tighter episode on the next episode of the Divinely Inspired Podcast.